So I just need to ask more about, a little bit more about enrollment and how you think criminal justice will be impacted. I have some ideas of what you might think, but...
Tell you what, you're the expert. We're having a conversation. It's not just you asking me questions. Let's talk.
Okay, so here's my caveat. I know we're supposed to be recruiting the older student. I hate saying that. The more non-traditional student. And I have plans for that, but right now, I'm dealing more with a society changing mindset, and it is getting harder and harder to encourage students to study public service for a lot of different reasons. And so I think that my hiccup right now is figuring out how to get them to come. And CBE is something I'm exploring, but that's only for a small portion of those individuals. I get more job offers now than I have students. So I am really not sure what the next step should be, and I'm kind of at a loss because I'm kind of dealing with a tide that is nothing I created of my own, but just something I'm dealing with. So
The key question really is identifying those people who might be willing to study criminal justice. And you're saying there are jobs there. It's a research question once again, which is just because you've recruited a particular population in the past, well, those things are seasonal. Traditional populations change, and people's interest in different fields change. So if it's older adults who are more interested in this, go for older adults. And maybe what's really important is, I don't know if are you offering an associate's degree?
Yes, it's also a transfer. That's the other.
Are you offering certificate programs?
Yes, but that's another problem, is that a certificate program will not guarantee employment. It has to be 6
what about people who are already employed?
Yes, that
Could they
is where
use the
CBE
certificates?
Yeah.
And that's a part of it, which is, if we think about enrollment only in terms of degree programs, we're tying our hands behind our backs. The question is, you're doing criminal justice. Who would benefit from it and how? Is there any chance that the local, where do your students go to work?
Mostly Madison County, which is
doing what?
Jail and police department. So sheriff's department. So they usually start in a jail and then move over into patrol.
What do they need from the people who already have those jobs? Are there skills they need to develop? Are there things they need to know about that your program can offer? And that's really the question. Who needs to be educated in criminal justice? Not just those who are new students, but those who are already in the field.
Okay, so my plan might work. All right. Yes. It might. I'm going to give it my best shot.
Who else wants to talk? Anything that's on your mind. What do you worry about?
What's the best conference you've ever been to about this? Have you been to, are there conferences to go to and to learn best practices?
Tell me about you. What else? Where are you heading?
Where am I headed personally? Well, I plan to stay here and see how this all goes.
Are you thinking about administration?
No. No, thank you.
Okay. There are a gazillion programs for PD. I headed 3 of them at Harvard. And one was for presidents, one was for senior administrators, and one was for more junior people. And there are programs that are being offered everywhere for this kind of thing. And what you ought to do is, in terms of the best is the one that best meets your needs. What is it you feel you need to learn as a faculty member who's going to be a leader at this campus?
You mentioned continuing ed. Do you think that's a great starting point? Because I don't feel like we do a lot in that. Am I missing that?
Continuing ed is a gift. What happens is you can do anything in continuing ed. It doesn't require approval of anybody on campus. It doesn't. What would you like to try and see whether it works? If it doesn't work one semester, you have a chance to fix it or drop it. But there's nothing lost. This is your great laboratory. And it's really good to use it that way. It's good. You want to try some certificate programs after you've taught? Try it through continuing ed. Try the first courses in that program through continuing. I mean, anything you want to do, you can try there without any loss or any worry.
See, ours is going to have to be revamped because it doesn't attract faculty to teach it. It's like $15 an hour or something, and it's not, we're going to have to rethink that if that's what we have to do.
Yeah, yeah. And particularly if you're talking about things like CBE, that's a good place to experiment with it.
All right, I've got one more. I had to cancel my online speech class this semester. It's not attracting a lot of takers right now. Does that not cause this model to be a little concerning for this area? I'm just curious if this is
Which
what
model?
these area, is this what rural Illinois kids want? Not just kids, non-traditional students. We got to show them this because they haven't seen this anywhere, right?
Show them what?
CBE.
Oh, okay. The fact that they haven't taken online courses doesn't reflect in any way on CBE. CBE you can do in online courses, you can do it in face-to-face, you can do it in a million different ways. There's nothing intrinsic to delivery in how you do CBE. The fact that students aren't taking courses online or enrollments may have dropped, ask them. Ask people who ordinarily would have taken those courses. How come you didn't take it? Why did you take the face-to-face course opposed to the online course? Why did you? Find out. Maybe the problem isn't online education. Is it asynchronous or synchronous?
Mine is, it's web blended. They have to come 3 times to give their speeches. Mine's a little weird. But are you
So yours is a hybrid program.
Yeah.
And the question may not be online or face-to-face. The question could be timing. The question could be anything. Find out.
My question is very similar. I'm very vocal about my interest in CBE. I have a lot of ideas, and I think this is the future of Lewis and Clark if it's led in the right direction. And I'm hopeful and optimistic, and I'm hoping that maybe my enthusiasm will increase other people's interest in it as well. My question goes a lot along with her question about online classes. I'm curious, both from your perspective and everyone's perspective, we hear a lot, students don't do well in online, or I'm not an online person, I prefer face-to-face. What kind of resources can we provide students that make them more successful online?
There's a large body of research on who's successful online and who's not successful online. And with online courses like traditional courses, a big measure is quality. You're better off not offering online courses than offering lousy online courses. They're not fungible. If you can offer quality online courses, then you can do it. That doesn't mean the marketplace wants them. So that's also a matter of finding out, what do our students want? Would they prefer some mix? Would they prefer all? Would they prefer? That's really the question that's out there. Take me to the next piece. What didn't I just answer for you? CBE. Did you ask a CBE part?
No, I just mentioned that I was interested in CBE and I was a proponent, encouraging other people to look into it.
And online courses, I don't know about you, I taught a course online during the pandemic. I found I had pluses in my course. I could watch all my students at once, which I couldn't in a real classroom. I mean, it's just harder because it was around a seminar table. I like teaching better face-to-face. I don't know if I was better one way or the other way. But as a preference, I liked one more than the other. It doesn't mean my students wanted one more than the other. So I just don't know. I've had the experience. When people ask me what I think of distance learning, when I was at Harvard, I had a friend who was a psychiatrist named Robert Coles. And one day I was meeting him for lunch, and he was a very, very popular professor. And I walked into this barn of a building. There had to be 1,200 students in that, sitting in that classroom. And up front was an itsy-bitsy Robert Coles. If that isn't distance learning, I don't know what is. The fact of the matter is you can do distance learning in person, and you can do distance learning online. And it all depends what resource you can give students.
What have you found the best way to ask these students to be? Like, so you say, go ask the students. Is it a survey? Is it a focus group? Do we go to middle schools and say, what is this group going to want? I mean, like, because you got to get that part where you
Right. Who's your target population is really the question. And then you can find out ways that you can best approach them. And this is easy. And what happens is, if you want, start with focus groups. What I recommend, though, is start with surveys, and after the surveys, go to focus groups. Because you can find out what they think from the surveys, and then find out if you truly understood it from focus groups. And it doesn't need to take a lot of time. All I'm saying is, it's better to know than to guess. Push me. What am I saying that you hate? Come back at me.
It's me again. I'm just going to project since this isn't working right now. I'm a novice, so excuse my ignorance with regard to CBE.
You know, those are always the scariest questions.
Well, get ready.
I'm
get ready.
a novice, you know.
I am in a health-related field, occupational therapy. So I am just having a hard time wrapping my mind around how CBE works in healthcare. Here's why. We have accrediting boards, as you talked and spoke to accreditation earlier, and there are certain skills that we absolutely have to teach our students. I just don't understand how we could truthfully and accurately assess whether or not clinically, when it comes to clinical skills, if a student is where they need to be just because they did something once, they checked out on it. You know, I did the assessment, I passed it, you know, and maybe again, this is going to my ignorance in how CBE is set up. But we do have skills checkouts where, you know, students come in and they do a skill and, you know, they pass it or fail it. But when there are licensure exams, you know, boards that they have to take, you know, once they're done with their education or their didactic experience, just having a hard time wrapping my mind around how to best incorporate CBE with regard to health-related fields. And I don't know if my other health people are having that same issue or not, but can you just speak to how we could implement it with regard to healthcare?
And again, remember, I'm not suggesting substitution. I'm suggesting enrichment. So they're still going to take the same exams. They're still going to complete the same courses. But at least at the start, what you can do is you're just documenting what they know and they can do. You're already doing this. And all you're doing is doing this again, but as a list of skills and knowledge these students have mastered. Now you ask me, who do I want to hire? Do I want to hire the student who's gotten A's and B's in all your courses? Or do I want to hire the student who you can certify to me has the following list of skills and knowledge? I'd feel much better hiring the second student. It's something you can give that student, it's something you can give employers. It's just looking at everything you're doing in a different kind of way. You've already done it when you planned the curriculum. When students graduate, what do they need to know and be able to do? And all you're doing with competency is saying they learn to do those things. They have those skills and knowledge. With time, accreditors and others are going to move the currency in the direction of competencies. And what's going to happen over time is competencies are going to vary. You have one view of what competencies are, and the community college down the block has another. And the university, SIU has a third. We're going to have to agree on those kinds of things. But in the meantime, if you can show me the competencies that you believe in, and I believe in you, that's the important part of it, I'm going to hire your student. Go ahead. I don't think I thrilled you. Go ahead, come back.
Did my face give it away?
Yeah, do not major in poker.
I can't, I wouldn't. So earlier I asked the question about culture as well, and you made the statement you're just, enriching and enhancing what you already do. And so again, I'm a novice at this. I'm still learning the whole ideology around CBE. We in our program, and a lot of our health career programs, we have cohorts. So they start together, they finish together, they're on the same track. So when you have CBE and you have students who are learning at various times, they are achieving the skills, mastering them at various times. Going back to the culture question, if I have, a cohort of 21 and 3 of my students are, fast-paced and they've met, the initial competencies, and then I have 18 who are still not where they need to be, that's the part that I felt like, or the question I was trying to ask earlier. How do you keep that culture going where students are still supporting each other, they still have the opportunity to, work with each other? And for us in our program, culture is huge. Like, they're a family away from their family. They probably spend more time with each other in our classrooms than they do with their own families at home. So if we're moving and learning at different paces, we're achieving our milestones or our competencies at different paces, how do we maintain that sense of culture? That's kind of what I was asking earlier.
Okay, I've got 2 different responses for you. The first one is, in the short run, keep doing what you're doing. But just indicate what they've managed, what the outcomes are these people capable of achieving. What can you certify to me and to them that they can do? And remember, this one's pass-fail. Either I have the competency or I don't have the competency. A C is not inadequate to give me a competency in that area, okay? Now, let me tell you another one. So you're not breaking up your cohort, you're not doing any of that. You're just giving them a set of competencies when they're done. Let me tell you about a competency-based cohort program I created. The president of MIT and I, when I was at the Woodrow Wilson Foundation, wanted to see if we could create a freestanding competency-based ed school. And we were offering programs in teacher education. And this was one in which students advanced at their own pace. And what happened was we built in the cohort parts. It's not as if some students finished in 2 weeks and others finished in, and everybody else finished, and some people finished in 9 years. They all finished within a year of each other, okay? What happened is we built the cohort and we created times for the cohort to get together. Each student studied, and it was entirely competency-based. There were no courses. You just worked on your competencies. But still, they had the same kinds of problems they ran into because they were new doing their new trade or skill as teachers. So we had sessions for the cohort in which they all participated. And when they graduated, some decided they still wanted to continue in those cohorts and meet with them. Others, new people were admitted and they came into the cohort, they filled it up. You had 1 or 2 or 3 new people, and you're fine. So we didn't lose a thing, and we gained a lot because we could individualize the program and be sure they all graduated with competencies. We did not lose the cohort effect.
Thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if my mic's on. But okay, hi. Hi.
Hi.
I am Deanna, and I teach reading and English here. And I also teach higher ed administrative courses at another university.
Where do you do that?
Missouri Baptist and UMSL. So when I am with my cohorts there, this research has been around for a while, and I have advised them for a very long time to think outside of the 3 credit hour model and the time-based model and divorce the product of these hours that were in the classes when people are learning from the actual product of learning. And they're all on board with that, and it's what I hope we start to do here. But their concern, and I think it's valid, is that these bold moves and changing that paradigm, are our regulators keeping up with that? Are our accreditors going to be okay with that? With the CBE model, HLC has provided some criteria, and we have to, we can justify our decisions, and it works. But these really bold moves of, eliminating the 3 credit hour, which I've been shouting for about 10 years now that it doesn't really measure learning. How do we make those changes and still please ICCB or HLC or whatever accreditor that you're working with? In your experience, is your sense of it that they're going to keep up with those big changes? Or do we need to sort of build that structure first so that we can justify those actions? Okay?
Question is, are you okay after that loud noise?
I'll be okay.
Okay. And that's one of the reasons I'm suggesting you be bilingual. Don't give up credit hours. Don't give up courses. Keep them both. Get really good at the competency stuff. Eventually the country is moving in your direction. HLC really wants some good examples. I said earlier, I had met with their board, and I've addressed their conferences, and they really want to do that. They're really worried, and they should be, that accreditation is very, very unpopular, and it's particularly unpopular. Why do people get accredited? For the most part, they get accredited because either states require it, or alternatively, that they want to qualify for federal financial aid programs. Now, what happens when the federal government says, you don't need it? They're done. So that what they're trying to do now is make themselves relevant. And they're looking for powerful examples that they can use to prove their relevance. So that I think with HLC, you can help them and they can help you. What also happens is you can educate them and they'll work with you because they need you. That's a weird thing to say, but they need you. And the other thing that we're talking about now is don't throw everything out. We're not doing a replacement. I'd say you were crazy if you told me you were getting rid of all your courses and credits. Don't do it. But you can gradually move toward one and make that the focus of what you do. And it's not all or nothing.
Thank you.
We have a question via the Zoom chat. It's from Louise Jett. She asks, I don't give quizzes or exams. I have students demonstrate knowledge via learning portfolios. Can CBE be used with this sort of assessment style?
Yes. The assessment style doesn't change. What changes is it's the floor. CBE is pass-fail. Either I've demonstrated the competency or I haven't. Evaluation in CBE is largely formative. which is I turn something into you and you say, okay, what you need to work on is blah, 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 blah. I come back next time, and I only got blah. The next time I come back, you say, okay, we're done. That was a summative evaluation. It didn't have to be, but it was. The reality then is you can use any kind of assessment device you want, as long as it'll help you determine whether the person is competent. And you have to be very clear about what competence means. We need a good definition for each competence so that you can assess it. It'll also help with traditional courses. Is she happy?
I can't see her face.
Does she look like...
There we go. She says, makes sense.
Come on, what else?
I'm going to ask a question from up here. Am I on? Okay.
No, from down there.
From down here, yes, up here, down there. I think one of the things I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around is most of our programs, we have a couple faculty. We all teach a whole lot. And if we're keeping traditional and adding this piece in, like, how do we, like, where does the time, like, I know it's not time-based, but where does the time come to have students who may need to come in and check off on competencies or do that part, and we're still teaching traditional classes? And then I think part of some of us think maybe that we almost are going to be available, like, like all day long, all evening, all weekend, because those are when our students might need us. Like, it's not going to be, which, again, maybe right now we're working to, schedules that fit us instead of students, but, like, I think just understanding the time piece of it, even though it's, the time piece of, like, what's the faculty role and how does it all fit together is really confusing.
And here, you're going to have to work that out, which is to say, you're not going to introduce all of this at once. Try a competency. How much time does it take for you to assess a student using this competency? I don't know why you're troubled by having it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Are you committed or aren't you? So that, find out what difference it makes. And then figure out what you need to do about it. Maybe course loads need to be adjusted. I just don't know the answer now, and neither do you. So that, who knows, maybe it is central assessment agency on campus. Figure it out, try it. You're entering an experiment.
I'm going to ask one more question. Do you foresee, like, if you had these competencies and you had maybe really good rubrics to measure them, that people other than the content expert, so maybe I'll have someone else who's coming in who can follow my rubric and knows what it is, but maybe isn't an occupational therapist or whatever who's doing that competency, or you always see, like, the person who's assessing them as being the content expert in the area? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it varies. Let's say one of the things that was really important to you was capacity to write and read. Do I need to be an occupational therapist to judge that? I don't know. There may be some skills that I don't need to be an occupational. Try it. And you're trying one course, you're trying a couple of competencies, figure out what it does to you. And the idea is not to have you work 24/7. That would just be stupid. You wouldn't want to do it. It's just a bad idea. And figure out what you do need. If you think it would be useful to have competencies, then figure out how to do it and do it well. A man with his own microphone.
Yeah. So I'm all in with competencies. I taught competency-based education for 13 years before I came here.
You're asking the wrong person. He knows the answers.
But for career-based things, it's great, and I really liked it, and the employers liked it. My concern is about education as a whole. What I'm thinking of, my son's in 4th grade, and I'm going to say this right now, and it sounds like I'm showing off, but there's a point to it. Something I had to learn in 4th grade, one of many poems. The tree that never had to fight for sun and sky and air and light, but stood out on the open plain and always got its share of rain. Never became a forest king, but lived and died a scrubby thing. The man that never had to toil to gain and farm his patch of soil, never had to win his share of sun and sky and light and air, never became a manly man, but lived and died as he began. Good timber does not grow with ease, the stronger wind.
How long does this go?
I got two more, I'm almost there. Stronger wind, the stronger trees, the further sky, the greater length, the more the storm, the more the strength. By sun and cold and rain and snow and trees and men, good timber grows. I'll leave it there as one last thing, but my point is in 4th grade, none of us wanted to do that. And that was one of 3 poems that we did, and it used language that we weren't used to, and we had to learn what that deeper meaning was of things. And I look at education, and I fear that generation after generation, as we seek to give people what they want, we find what they want is applesauce and chicken nuggets, and that somewhere we need to hold on to that thing that keeps a higher standard, that education is a lofty thing, not just a career-focused thing. And it could be in our part of the industry, it could be, that's not our place anymore. I don't know where that place is, but somewhere it seems like there has to be some place that holds people to higher standards than what they're comfortable with and pushes them beyond that.
And here, I'm not championing dilution of education and low standards. I don't think so anyway. No, I'm not. My point is, why did your teacher make you memorize that? I mean, maybe it had all kinds of good things that it could do for you. Just tell me what it is. Why are you making me do this? I may not agree with you, but tell me why. I want to understand it. Why are you making me study all these stupid things? Tell me what the value is. What am I going to learn? It turns out one of the best courses in my life I ever took was geometry. It taught me logic. I really learned how to think using geometry, supporting every move that I made in a proof with a reason that each of those stages was the right thing to say. And I know I've botched up all the words, but I was on a train trip recently. I was trying to figure out if I could still prove if 2 sides of a triangle are equal, the angles opposite are equal. I could. So that's all. That's not a big deal. Just because you found it useful, that's nice, but why did she make you do it?
Question?
Sure.
Oh, go ahead, Randy. No, go ahead.
Well, my
Can you
question
both ask your questions? I'll choose the one I like best.
I have a financial question. And I'm afraid you're going to say you'll have to figure that out, and I really don't want to hear that answer. But how do you envision the fee structure with CBE for students, and how do you envision faculty being paid so that it's not lesser? How do you envision that?
And here, I don't know any institution that's gone toward competency-based education that's changed its remuneration system. I don't. I just don't know how, you'd have, at least in the short run, you don't have to figure it out. You can work it out later if it leads to something substantive. You're still just teaching courses. And you do whatever you do with the courses. And you're going to find out that when you add competencies to it, it makes it much faster, so I can now go to a 7-course load. Or alternatively, it makes it much slower and I need to go to a 4-course load. You'll figure all that out, and that'll be obvious. But in the interim, don't worry about it. When you hit a bump, you'll know it. And then it's time to make a change. Stop me if you think that's bad advice, okay?
I don't know that we know.
And you're not heading off into an abyss. You're just offering courses. You're doing what you did last year and the year before, and you've just added an element to it, and you're trying it out. Keep asking. Oh, it's your turn.
You know, I might have missed this.
Is this a petition to make me stop?
This might have been answered before I got here, but how do you tell through competencies that the student works well with others? Or that,
Make it a competency.
yeah, but how does that look? How do you design that? That's a question I have, because here, much like Ashley, I teach a cohort student, I teach architecture. So in architecture, you get a cohort that comes in every other year, and they work together, they move through together. Now,
Yeah.
you answered Ashley's question, I'm not asking that again, but you know, we make them do these group projects sometimes, not as much anymore, but how do you know if they work well with others, if they're going to be able to go in a situation and not rub people the wrong way?
It's almost impossible
Okay.
not to have people learn about working well together. I mean, working as teams, working as in most professions these days.
Even though they're moving at different paces on their own, and this person is.
But they've got to be able to master that skill. When a firm hires them, is the firm going to expect them to work as a team?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
How am I people going to get hired if they
They
can't
do-
work
well,
as
yeah,
a
they do
team?
internships, yeah.
And so you're defining what it means, or the employer's defining, in your profession, what does it mean to work as a team? Now, there are two ways you can talk about team. One is the life skills I need to perform as a human being, and the life skills I need to perform as an architect to get a job. There's another set of things that deal with teamwork, and that's the pedagogy that you're using in your classes. I don't know that they're all the same, but I bet they head toward the same goal, every one of those things. You're not having students work as a team because it's not a useful thing to do. You think there's some pedagogic value in doing that. And the fact of the matter is that an employer that's going to hire those people demands they have that skill. Just define it. What is it you're looking for?
Well, even at the master's level in architecture, students don't work together that much. Traditionally, they just don't, because they're developing a portfolio on their own. I'm not saying it never happens, but it's rare.
And
I went through graduate school, and I didn't work on group projects. I worked on one group project through the entire portion.
And that
of
could be
graduate
enough,
school.
which is, if that's something, I don't know how much time it takes to learn how to work as a team, but I know that if that's something that's really important to you, to employers, to others, they'll build it in at least for some element of time, or some element of, you think it's important, send them into the workplace for an internship and see what it's like. But I think it's better if you give them the skill before they get there, give them the experience. And all you're doing is saying what it is when you think teamwork's important, what's that look like? Make it specific. That's all.
I was just going to say, I started the program in '05, paralegal
You've been doing
program.
what?
The paralegal program. My name is Becky. And what I did, maybe it was, I don't know, cheating, but I went to the professional, like I went to the American Bar Association and the American Association for Paralegal Educators, and I looked at, when I started the program, what do they consider the most important competencies for paralegals when they
Yeah.
enter the field? So I started, every outcome of every course, because I had to create the courses or assist with that, I built that in. So I knew that it was built into the objectives of all of the courses that they took. And so then when they got to the internship, I presented a list of what ended up being 10 core competencies that was universal everywhere I looked. American Bar Association, State Bar Association, and I'm thinking there's a lot of other professional associations that may have competencies that you could kind of piggyback off of. And then I have the employers, when they do their internships, assess their competencies. I give them the 10, and then I have like a laundry list. They don't have to do all these things like investigation or interviews, but if they did, basically check mark anything they did that falls under any of these 10 categories, and then rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 if you can. If you can't, fine, but if you can, how did they do? If they did any of the things in these 10 competencies. And then I've done that for 15 years, but I don't assess that. I do it, the content as we go, and I embed it into the courses, but I let the employer that hosts the internship, that has to be a licensed attorney, they do all of the assessment, not me. And then they give the feedback to the student, and I have them sit down and have a dialogue. This is what you did well. This is what you could improve on. So then the student is then equipped with information when they go on interviews to say, these are my strengths and these are my weaknesses, and that's how they know, because they've had, I mean, it's like this whole full circle feedback thing, but
I think
I
that's
don't know if that's the
perfect.
same thing as what everybody else is doing.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
So you can
now.
use employers.
And here,
to
you're going to try a bunch of different ways. You've got that way. And what you ought to do is present it to your colleagues at some point, not this week, not next week. And what we're going to do is learn about this together. And you're one of the pros. I don't know how many of you do things like that, but you're one of the pros.
Yeah, I was just thinking about Ashley, like if you guys have a professional association for, for occupational, I'll bet there's
it's
a
worth
consistent,
discussing it
I mean, then you don't have to
with
reinvent
each
the
other.
wheel.
Look, here's how we're doing it. Here's how we're doing it. What have you learned? What do you see as the weaknesses? What do you see as the strengths in what you're doing? You're going to move forward with this together and develop it together.
But that helps that you don't have to be responsible for the culture. Like everybody can advance at their own pace. You could have slow movers. You can have fast ones that are already like kicking it. And then whenever they get to the point where their intern host evaluates them, they could all be at different. It's not as much of a competition while they're in the classroom. Because
is there
their
any
own
value in
hosts-
this kind of stuff for architecture?
Oh, it happens. Oh, sorry. It happens similarly to what Becky's saying. You see, I have two programs. I have architecture and I have a drafting and design program, and they have a lot of crossover in them depending on what the person's doing, because some of the students are transferring and going off, some are going to work. And so there are professional organizations that give exams to students. They don't have to take them. They're not required in our program because they're specific to certain software developers, if that makes sense. So a lot of employers don't say, yeah, I want this student to be able to use this software to Autodesk competencies. I just need them to have been exposed to it because I'm going to teach them to use it the way I want them to use it. But that's different from employer to employer. And that's the struggle with that, for me at least.
What we're talking about is which I you dot. But what you're saying is they all want students to be able to do that.
Do something, yeah.
What's it look like?
Yeah.
And that's all that, you guys are probably doing a whole bunch of this already. And God, if you're already doing it, I think the biggest error that one can make is think that you're doing something that's dramatically different than anything you've ever done before. You're probably well on your way in most of what you're doing. You're just being explicit about the outcomes and the assessments that you use to get there. And you may decide down the pike, that's not a very good assessment method. Or have you thought about adding using a looking glass, an 8-ball? Is he competent? Ask again later. Okay. You may figure out what to add to it to make it stronger. But you ought to figure out, that's another thing, you ought to figure out what you're all doing in this regard and who can be helpful in learning from.
Mr. Levine, it's me again. Here we go.
I don't want to hear that you're naive and
My wheels are turning again. And in your article, you mentioned with competency-based education, we're moving from letter grades and it's just a pass or fail. So my question is, how do students set themselves apart if we're all having the same competencies when we're done? And when I think about employers, especially for our program, they all want the best students, like, you know, and they'll call us and say, hey, I've got such and such interviewing for a job. You know, I see that they had a 3.7 GPA. You know, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm giving you something better. I'm telling you, everybody who finished this program
Yeah, but
is
they don't want
competent in all
just
the skills
everybody.
you're
They
looking
want the
for.
best of everybody.
Go
So if-
interview them. That's not your problem. I'm telling you, I'm certifying that every one of the students who graduated from this has all the competencies that you're looking for. I couldn't do that before. The fact of the matter is I had some students who were 4.0 and they were competent in everything, and I had some students who were 2.0 and they weren't.
So can competencies have qualifiers? You met the skill, but you know, you did what you were supposed to do, but was it the best? Maybe not necessarily. So can they
And I'm
have
not competent.
Okay. Is that no gray area?
No grade. Competent or not competent.
Okay. One more question. I like to leave having practical resources for things. So if you could recommend one thing for us to say, this is the best resource for you to go learn about competency-based education, what would you recommend?
Oh, there are all kinds of things that are written on it. I can go find something if you want it. But what I really recommend is the most helpful thing I've heard today is what you're all already doing. That moves you in that direction. It'd be great to do an inventory of what's going on and talk to each other. Or just to have meetings to find out how this thing works and what people are doing and where they want to go. But I can get you material on this.
Thank you.
Yes, the philosopher in the back.
I have a comment, I guess, and maybe a couple of questions,
Sorry, Janet, I was supporting the mic.
or one question.
And just remember what happens when I lose my temper.
I would just say to everyone here, if you haven't read Arthur's book, then you really ought to. There are copies floating around. I've read it, and I know other people have, but I think a lot of the questions and maybe the overarching context of his presentation gets filled out in that. And so I would just recommend you to read the book if you haven't. It's there.
Thank you.
In the book, you say at one point, in making all these changes, you use these phrases like, and it's not a quote, but it's close. In order to kind of adapt and go to the future, you have to switch from teaching-centered to learning-centered, is the way you phrase it. And when I heard that phrase, I was kind of thinking, and this connects to what you just said about what we do here at Lewis and Clark. I think a lot of us, if not all of us, have moved from a paradigm of teaching-centered to student-centered. That's kind of the way we've talked about it. So when I see that learning-centered phrase, I think that's something that Lewis and Clark has already shifted to. And I don't know, other people can agree or disagree with that. That's my perception. So I was just going to ask you, is that accurate, or how do you handle those two terms? Can you explain those?
They're the same thing.
Okay.
And the only difference is when you say learner-centered, what you're saying is the first one was teaching-centered. Mm-hmm. What have you been taught?
Okay. Yeah.
And the second one is, what have you learned?
What have you learned? Okay.
But it's still the difference between whatever-centered and student-centered.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The other aspect of it was learning center would be outcome centered. But yeah, that would be cognate. And we would be already
there's so many
doing some of
different
that.
words that could be, or learning outcome centered, or
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so I just that's kind of familiar. The other point, I guess, is not so much a question. Maybe it's a commendation for you that, and you can help me at the end of the book. It's been a while since I've looked at it. I read it.
Me too.
I read it in okay. But at the very end, you were making some recommendations, and I think the very last one you make about what schools can do, universities can do with curriculum and so forth. And you said that we have to recognize the importance of ethics, value, and critical thinking. And I thought maybe I could ask you just to comment or elaborate on the significance of that. I think it feeds into some of our sense of at least Doyle's thing about losing culture in a wider perspective. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't remember whether I included this in the book, There was an interview with a person who made the atomic bomb. He was at Los Alamos. And he was asked if he felt guilty having made the atomic bomb. And he said, I feel as guilty as a tin can maker feels when a can is thrown through a window. And I thought, that's appalling. An atomic bomb only has one use. That can has a lot of uses. And I think all learning ought to come with a label, that we have an obligation to teach our students that. And it's how to use it properly. And that's ethics, and that's values, and it's critical thinking. And we can't send students out, whether it's welding or it's English literature, without some sense of those three things. It's irresponsible, I think. Like a doctor giving you a prescription, not telling you when to take it and how much to take.
I have a couple comments, if that's okay. To Ashley's point about grading and letting people stand apart, some systems don't do just pass or fail, they do A, B, or fail. So you're mastered when you're at an A, and you're competent when you're at a B, but C's don't exist because that's not really a mastery level in a lot of respects. So that's one thing that we can consider. The grading schema, that's completely up to us to decide. This is a blank slate. Another point I wanted to make is everyone, I think, kind of gets concerned about the pacing, that you can work at your own pace. But I'd like to challenge everyone to think about the fact that right now we're setting the pace for students. We're the ones assuming that we know at what pace a college student should work through our material. The problem right now is that we're losing people that fall behind. And so this could be a chance for us to see, okay, are we really pacing our classes right now at the pace of where our college students are right now? Or do we maybe need to step it up a little bit, maybe make it move a little faster? Maybe we need to step it back a little bit, make it move a little slower. This is a chance for us to really see how students will pace themselves if they're given the chance to just learn the material as they are capable of doing.
I think that's really well put. And by the way, I don't care whether you do this or not. I'm just giving you my best advice and my best knowledge in this area. The rest is up to you. I still get to eat at my favorite restaurant in town, whether you do it or don't.
My name is Coral Kimball, and I'm in the math department, and I appreciate what Jen said about A's and B's and fail, or not competent, because in math, everything builds, on the previous material, and I have noticed that students who pass with a C really struggle in the next class, and so I have always thought they really should get a B in order to be able to move on to the next class. So that, I really appreciate that.
And again, your assessment tool is your assessment tool. If I were doing it, I'd do pass-fail. But you have an option. Just because I do it that way doesn't mean you ought to do it that way. You can do it in a really bad way, just as you, no.
So for the students who struggle, if it's going to take them more support to get to that pass, how do you do that with limited funds, and what does that look like?
Find out how much it's going to take to get them there. And how much of it can you add AI to what you're doing already? And that's an extra burden. So that when a student's having trouble with some area, can you say, take a look at this. I think this is really going to help you. And get them back into class faster than if you hadn't done that kind of thing. And get them up with everybody else. Again, it's feeling your way. You know what you're worried about. What are the solutions to help you get past it?
I had another quick question.
Sure.
When you were talking about the school that focused on Maria and her needs, what kind of supports were they offering that you saw that were really helpful?
I described the financial aid one. Another one they had was they were really doing logistics around Maria's life, so that they were very careful about when they offered courses in terms of timing. Semesters, sometimes Maria, when her kids were off on vacation, it made more sense to offer shorter courses during the year, so there are options and she could take off a part of the time with the kids, so on and so forth. I mean, they did all of those kinds of things. And there are some schools that have decided that what they do is provide childcare for those times in which a parent suddenly finds, I got a problem. So it's anything. It's whatever Maria needed. Can I ask you a question? Which is, does this sound less crazy now than when we started talking? Or does it still seem equally ridiculous? For how many of you does this still feel like a serious obstacle?
I feel like we're going to need support systems in place.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I think we know what those are. I think Jen has done some very extensive research and stuff like that, they visited Salt Lake Community College and some other things, but we're going to have support systems in place that will help the faculty.
Yeah.
We can't carry the whole load. I mean, sure, we would like to try, because we like to maybe do it all,
But it doesn't make any sense to send you out into the dark to do this alone.
So we will need whatever support system. I mean, that's probably why it seems crazy, because we don't know what that looks like. But if we had that, then maybe, we would be successful. But there's gonna be stuff that we're gonna need.
And I've never visited Salt Lake, but I've visited other colleges that have competency-based programs. And what did they need? What were the worst things that happened while they went on this journey? What kinds of support do they need? Do you need a soft money, paid for by other funds than hard money that comes in every year, to bring in somebody who can work with you and is an expert in the field? And that's the person's job. So when you say, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this, there's somebody there, in the same way that when you get your technology, there's an office that you can work with when it breaks.
Our time we're at 11:48, so.
Oh my God.
I just want to keep everyone on their schedule. I know some people have classes and things like
Yeah.
that, so I just want to say thank you so much for
My pleasure.
having this time with us, and I'm sure if other faculty have questions, you could always send you an email or catch you walking to your car. So, no, just kidding. But anyway, I think it's a great conversation starter for all of us for more discussions to come, but we appreciate your time.
And the other thing I swear is, look, I've been a professor. I've had deans who told me to do things that seemed absurd. And I had grave questions. I also had good leadership in the course of my career. And you know what the obstacles are that you're going to face. And you can get the help to get you through it, I swear it. I've seen it done.